All right. Warm welcome to everyone present here for today's talk. My name is Roshan Nair. I work as an English teacher in an international school in Mumbai and have been teaching for 12 years. I've taught first language English, English as a second language, English general paper, and global perspectives. I'm also pursuing my PhD in English from Mumbai University. One of the challenges almost all teachers and parents face today is with respect to cultivating a reading habit among children. And because our students do not read, their writing and inevitably even their speaking skills take a hit. Students are somehow not fascinated by stories anymore as perhaps we were. I remember my summer breaks spent reading comics, children's magazines like Tinkle, and later on, after a healthy reading habit was developed, taking up novels that did not have images. Our times were perhaps simpler. We did not have reels, shorts, and all other distractors that deliver content to people in 30 seconds or less, thereby keeping the attention span of today's children reduced to mere minutes. I think this is where our students struggle because how can they read longer texts and comprehend images produced in them without the help of the visual aid? Texts anyway build up matter and do not get straight to the point like reels and shorts do. So when their attention span is up, they give up before they get to the core of the story. While we often wonder what could be done, ending up sermoning our students on the myriad benefits of reading the joys and thrills of a good suspense narrative, it somehow falls on deaf ears. Today, I'm here to discuss three simple strategies that I've used in my classroom to tackle three separate challenges, namely reading, writing, and speaking. The first of it is using film as text. I'm not here to tell you use films. You already do. I'm just trying to see if we could redefine the art of reading and writing and use film as a medium that facilitates this. We know from experience that good writing demands sound observational skills and excellent reading. Films can become a great source for analysis, courtesy the many angles the director may use, or the quiet expressions of a character that reveal their point of view, or even the score, which could subtly foreshadow events to come. We often discourage children from being glued to the screen and even dismiss the potential that a good film has. I think it works fairly well because at its core, it works a bit psychologically. What I mean by that is a student is not immediately put off by the idea of watching a scene as they might be the same were presented to them as a few pages worth of information. So there are two simple film related strategies I want to share with you today. The first is called short share. Let me elaborate how that works. Here is an image from a CGI short film called Francis. This is a horror film about a girl who goes boating on a lake and encounters a bizarre creature. It's not very frightening, but it's quite gripping. One of the things that could be done here could be to ask students to describe the scene. This could include the time of day, the water, which seems to be still, a kerosene lamp that could suggest it's quite dark, the body language of the character as they read it. So you could expect answers on the lines of relaxed, taking a break, even chilling in a boat on a cool night. Students could then work out a short descriptive scene. You could move further and show them the next image from the same movie. Students could read into the expressions of the character and come up with what they think the character feels like. If they think she is worried, what could be the reason, and so on. Since it's only a 7 minute movie, students could even watch the entire movie and go on to compare their description and character analysis with the plot and see how similar or different they are. Another method I have, let me see. Yeah, it plays. I have to spark curiosity and creativity is called mute scene. Here you play a short 2 minute clipping, such as this one here, which is muted. Students need to observe the characters, what they're doing, and make a guess about the conversation they could be having. Since it's a 2 minute clip, again, it could be shown again in the classroom where you could scaffold your students the first time around, prompting them to pay close attention to the expressions of the young boy, the contrasting expressions of his older brother, the mother who's probably scolding the older brother. So, what this does is these prompts will get those kids involved who are unsure what they must think in this activity. Once this is done, you could simply unmute, and students then do the same comparative work that they did before. So, this activity could be very useful for teaching dialogue, which requires tightness and precision in writing. Getting students to notice subtle conflicts that each characters portray when they speak could be a great way of conveying how complex characters generally are within stories and how realistic characters often showcase different attitudes towards a subject. So, when you have students, as I often have in my class, who include forceful dialogue like, hey there, Mike, how are things going? Cool, man. How's it going? Oh, very well. Times are tough. Yeah, times are tough. And I'm sitting and wondering, where is this conversation headed? It lacks subtext and reads merely like a transcript of a boring conversation somebody had. But when students realize most characters don't necessarily agree with each other, I'll just move on to the next slide now. Uh, so when students realize that their characters don't necessarily agree with each other, or that some characters try to show dominance through their speech or mannerisms, we somehow try to you could try out different scenes with different range of angles and sound. What this does is, movies could teach students to observe minor details within a short frame or a scene, and then they could learn that similar details are present in the texts that they read on paper. And if they're somehow successful at picking up those subtle images within a text, you know that they are on the right track to being better readers. Once you're able to guide your students towards the layered details that are present within texts, students will start to demonstrate a liking for closer observation. It's only a matter of time before you could introduce written text, tailor similar activities where they focus on word choices instead of shots and scenes, and get their focus on devices and get students proactively discussing writing structure. The next method that I have is called the audio method. And traditional role plays, they still work wonders. I've tried, and I'm sure so have you, getting students to work together and perform. One of my tempted go-to activities is getting students in groups where they brainstorm on a topic, write a script, and perform a talk. If you arm them with props like headphones and a mic, and you get a podcast of sorts. It's fun. I'm sure many of you have done this in your class. Agree with me here, but I think you could give this traditional activity a small twist. So you could start off conventionally, dividing your students into groups, and they write and perform a 2 minute talk. Now you could use the record feature on your phone to record the performance, play it back to your students, and ask them to trim the 2 minute talk to a 40-second trailer. So, this simple edit challenge will get your students thinking about their choice of words, help them to identify and retain the most important points, arguments that they have in their respective talks, and more importantly, get them to think critically about the language they use. I must tell you, it's absolute fun just watching students putting across their arguments about which parts of the talk they should retain in their 40-second edited trailer. There is something else that could be used very effectively, I think. One of my favorite apps as on today is Audible. I was extremely skeptical about it when I used it first. I'm someone who assigns voices for separate characters in my head when I read stories. I was unsure whether I'd be able to enjoy and retain my love for reading if someone else was doing the reading for me. But I must tell you, it's an absolute delight just listening to stories being performed so beautifully by professionals. It's something I've done in my school as well. Well, not getting them to use the app, but to use the idea of recording stories for fun. It's something of an antidote to uh, reading exhaustion, in my opinion. So the class activity I held was something extremely simple and doable. And in the end, upon reflection, I thought there were a couple of things I could add the next time I do it. So I took this short story called Before and After by Anil Menon. It's a humorous story about a South Indian middle-aged couple who live in the near future, surrounded by a lot of tech. And it talks about the impact of media and technology on relationships. This was a simple three-page short story. So I got a few students to play the narrator, different characters. We went to an empty classroom and I recorded the audio. When this was played in the classroom, students had a lot of fun listening to their friends play out different characters. What stayed with me was one kid telling me he didn't feel like it was a three-page story. It seemed much shorter when he was listening to it. What it told me was that the audio story of the same length reduced the cognitive load on the student and he was able to focus better. So effectively, we don't need to shorten texts or have easier versions like the abridged versions to get our students interested. If you could just change the medium and get them through it. But like I said, upon reflection, I felt there were several things that I could have done. For instance, during our rehearsal, I could have probably had like a director's cut and given my students inputs. So you could stop your students midway and give them insights such as, say, narrator, how about you read your part like a detective discovering a secret, and main character, deliver that line like you're trying to hide a lie. So what this does is it gives students an understanding about tone, motivation that different characters have. Thereby, it helps them to read, comprehend, and eventually write better. More importantly, I think the audio method also makes students realize that their perception of a text being long is just a myth. Um, Once they're not burdened by acknowledging different punctuation marks or pronouncing different difficult words, they open up to comprehension slightly better. I feel when they listen to stories, they also understand how a text is actually read. And if we could encourage students to read thereafter, there is a good chance that they might try to imitate the readers they have heard rather, and how this possibly helps us. Students may be able to understand the pause after commas or the longer pauses, full stops bring in, say, short sentences or even one word sentences. The last of the One of the last strategies that I have for today is the talk club. Uh, I know there are some schools that have their own talk clubs, and some of you are affiliated with TED. We in our school we have recently started a talk club where I teach here, and I think it's one of those little things that you could do for your students from a skill building point of view. The talk club nurtures creativity, keeps students abreast with contemporary matters, allows them to discuss issues that concern them, and lastly, it gives students a platform to express their ideas. That said, I'm sure most teachers out there, you are facing a challenge of getting students to speak coherently. At times, it's quite a task to get them to say anything apart from nervous mumbles. One of your club activities, or for that matter, your regular class activity, could include reading infographics and producing coherent sentences and arguments using the data you have presented to them on screen. So you can consider, for example, the infographics on display here. You could have two students pair up, look at the data for a minute, and You could then have them construct an argument against using plastic with the help of the infographics on screen. As a scaffolding method, you could also, introduce words like however, while, even though, and such words and so on while presenting contrasting data. Once the visual data is present, you're tackling data reading, you're tackling sentence construction, coherence, cohesion, and in a paired activity, this could include also discussion and brainstorming, although those things might play only a minor role. Students could be brought together on maybe five such pertinent issues, and a group could perhaps work out a short talk on possible action plans that people and governments could take to tackle issues. So effectively, the infographic activity caters to most of the students in our class. I don't know how it is with everybody else, but like I've said, in where I teach, I've got students who are very reluctant speakers. These are students who freeze at the idea of talking something. So if I have a talk activity where I ask them to speak their opinion on plastic pollution, that may not be great, because after 10 or 20 seconds, I know that my majority cohort would start using fillers like and ah and just stop and stammer, and they are helpless. So I know that even if I give them a word or a sentence to as a stem to go ahead and work on, they have already made up their mind, and they've given up. So it doesn't work. It's a wasted effort because they've given up. And what happens in all this is that the substance of their talk, it would be reduced drastically, and more importantly, it's their confidence that takes a hit. Instead, if I could handhold my students through an infographic, my students may not have to conjure matter out of nowhere and learn to use the matter in front of them. I could even demonstrate how the data could be interpreted. So, kind of like give a demo, and tell students who may still find this challenging how to go about. But I know that over a period of time, students get comfortable with the idea of speaking in class. I want to go back to that short share activity I spoke earlier about, where students learn to construct dialogue and understand narrative structure. A similar activity could be conducted in your talk club or in your regular speaking class activity, where you play a news piece, presenting some data on mute, and students work in pairs or groups to guess what the anchors are saying. Again, through this activity, you are tackling a wider array of non-fiction text types. To sum up, I hope that some of these activities are all of these activities are actually simple enough that you don't really need a special kind of preparation or different materials that you need to procure from somewhere. These are simple use of digital devices that are already available in your school, which should help you through these activities. More importantly, your students are not passive in any of these activities. They're proactively involved from the start to the end, because they're learning by doing. And in the process, if your students start to appreciate the subtle nuances involved in using language, then I think that's a major plus, particularly when there are AI platforms waiting to sabotage their reading and writing skills, ready to write essays within seconds. So, together, let's empower our students. Thank you so much for listening to me. Have a nice day. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roshan. Can you stop sharing your screens?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So, sir, I have a couple of questions to ask you based
Yeah.
on the summary of your talk. How
Yes.
do you select films appropriate for different age groups?
So yeah, so again, this depends on the code. Like the CGI film that I spoke about, Francis, which I selected,
Mhm.
that works very well for age groups 10 plus. So again, depending on your class cohort and the the level of the students, not just the age, you could have your activities tailored. So a dialogue activity where I want to teach my students that conflict and dialogue is absolutely necessary. I might ask them to focus on how characters don't really agree with. But
Mm.
if I have to tailor it down to students who are just getting into, I just want them to involve dialogue because they've not been including dialogue. I'll probably just ask them to just, look at how characters are talking. They're talking realistically, right? So just focus on that. So some of these activities that are tailored, like uh, the example, the mute scene example that I shared, that's from Life of Pi. Uh, all of these are actually age appropriate and friendly for any age group. It's just that how you use that resource needs to be tailored to the level of your students. And I'll reiterate, the level is not respect to the age. It's just that their learning level, what level they are at in terms of their language.
Right, sir.
Hmm.
So how long does a typical short share activity take, sir?
That actually depends because again, it depends on the class strength. Our class students here are about 18 to 20, and I know my ninth graders are very excited and they want to just share. Typically, the mute scene activity should take about 15 minutes roughly of your time where your students are actually working, and then maybe the next 15 to 20 minutes depending on your lecture length, that goes in actually taking supervising what your students have done, then diverting your discussion and your talk based on how students have worked and what their responses have been. So you can have that mute scene activity or dialogue as a topic taught through mute scene as an activity in about one lecture's time. So 40 minutes should be enough. Where the activity itself, where you're showing them the 2 minute scene, you're scaffolding them and you're giving them your instruction, should be about 5 to 10 minutes. Then students are doing their activity followed by a discussion. So that's kind of like, the induction course procedure and so on. So
How do you assess student writing from this mute scene activity?
based on their choice of words, the uh, kind of quality of dialogue they have, or the kind of characterization, even a simple verb such as yelled or screamed or shouted, these could also indicate character development in the sense that I know that the student is aware that his character is a little angry. So for me, that's minor characterization. That means they've given some thought over what that character is going to look like. So when I read, I'm going to just look at the choice of words. Look at the quality of their dialogue. Does it read, for example, like I said, for my ninth graders, if my students are writing like the example that I gave you, hey man, what's up? How are things going? Times are tough. Then we need to divert the lecture into how everyday actual language, actual speaking is rather boring, because when you're reading a text, your text has to be interesting enough for the reader to stay on. So how do you trim it and then bring it to the required, how do you edit it and keep the matter that's necessary on? So as far as assessing goes, it depends on, uh, uh, I've taught my students from eighth onwards. So by the time they hit ninth grade, I'm already aware. But even if I'm not, my activities take for granted that students know very little.
Okay.
Then based on their responses and little bit of their writing, that gives me some idea of where they are, and then accordingly I can just proceed.
So, in your with your experience, sir, as you said, you are aware of your students, like, and you can study them properly.
Hmm.
What subject examples have students produced that surprised you?
Uh, Students generally write fantasy. They are probably reading fantasy as well. But I think some of the students have been very observant. They take your words a little literally. So one of my catchphrases in my class is, keep your eyes and ears open as a writer, because there's matter and material everywhere out there. So if you are in the train or a bus and you see a quarrel happening, your eyes and ears should be open to understand, what are these characters talking about? What is the nature of the conflict? So if you are able to actually lift your characters, uh, your situations, your scenarios from everyday experiences, rather than have like a character called Harry or Sam or George living in New York or Philadelphia where you've never been, your stories become better. So I've had a couple of students who take this advice very seriously and have produced stories where nothing grand is happening. They are simple everyday things that could possibly realistically happen, but very well put. So all of those lessons where you we talk about characterization and we talk about sequencing a plot or in incorporating appropriate relevant dialogue. So I've had surprises where students have given me a scene which is very powerful. So, like I said, the bus fight incident that the student told me that she had actually seen that happen, and only thing that she did was she modified that the entire thing to suit the theme and the title that she had given. So these are some of the couple of surprises. They're very rare as an English teacher. I must admit, but there are students who come up with gems, and these are, a couple of examples where students have taken advice literally and worked on them.
Right. So, working in a group, each child is unique, sir, and
Mm.
they have their own personalities.
Correct.
How do you manage group disagreements during the edit challenge?
Oh, right. So I don't know if this is the correct strategy, but I just generally let them speak,
Mhm.
let them put across their points to a point where, they need my intervention. So once they, feel like, sir, why don't you decide which is right? So one of the things is, write on the pros and cons of each argument, like, which argument has more strengths. And they so each individual, so if two people have a disagreement on whether, what they have written or what their point is actually stronger, why so? Why is your argument better than someone else's? So a simple pros and cons, and we kind of uh, take it up, we consider and the weight of the argument, and uh, I think students themselves see that, well, as much as I hate it, probably the other person's idea is better, and maybe their argument should stay in the 40-second trailer and not mine. Maybe the next time we have the same activity, I'll come up with better arguments so that my point stays.
Right.
So we have one of those pros and cons things that works. Having to talk about each person's viewpoint. Uh, Sometimes, it's also about students being validated. So that's also a call that I take with some of my students who have a better understanding of things. So if it has happened that one student has had a say for a couple of things, then I just let the other person also take up the limelight, and their ideas all are also included so that nobody is left out. So these are a couple of things that I do in my classroom.
So, what was the reaction when students heard themselves in the recorded story?
They laughed. I think we had a good 5 minutes. I had to, settle down. They've heard each other on the phone and calls and all that, but
Right.
listening to their own recorded voice, that
It's
was
little unusual. Yeah.
it was unusual and it was different, and some were laughing, but it was fun. I think once your students are in and they're having fun, that your lecture is going well, instead of students just passively and quietly listening. So, as much as an ideal class would have been, me playing the audio and everybody just quietly listening to it, that wasn't really the case. There was some bit of noise. I like a little bit of noise in my class, to be honest. So, it was fun. They enjoyed the story because it was largely humorous. I took that story because I thought they will enjoy it. So, and that was really the case. And like I said, the limelight was, these two kids who said, so I gave them the handout later once the audio part was done. As part of the reading activity, I had given them the handout with the actual story. They just flipped through the pages and like, oh, didn't realize this was 3 pages long. And I was like, right, like, so, your idea of a story being long is, it's a myth. So it was fun.
Oh. So, coming to the grammar part of this teaching method, sir, how does the audio method help with punctuation awareness?
Um, I think even when I teach punctuations in class, we generally ask students to, notice how we speak in
Mhm.
the class, or anytime when we have to talk something, how do we construct our sentences? So just now I said so and I paused. So when you're writing that, there's a comma that goes. So paying closer attention to how the narrators delivering the content, observing where they are pausing, where there's a mild stop, where they are actually changing their voice. For example, when you have to say, "There he comes," right? So even as you hear it, you know that that's an exclamatory sentence because you've said, you've put emphasis on how you feel. There he comes, and not there he comes, right? Which is like a bland statement. So when we do these audio activities, when so we kind of stop, we pause, we stop. That is technically my call before the session, that these are parts where I'll probably pause and have a discussion, have a talk, uh, again depending on what really my outcome for that particular activity. So if it's punctuation and acknowledging punctuations, then I'll probably have a lot of pauses, and have my students talk about uh, how the speaker is speaking, where they're stopping, where they're pausing, where there is emphasis. So that's also the thing, like inverted commas that they use. Is it only for dialogue? Why do you use a single inverted comma? Sometimes it's for emphasis. So all of these, when you're delivering and you're speaking, with my current seventh graders who I'm teaching for the first time right now, I feel that conceptually they're very clear. They know if you tell them to define a comma or how why it's used, they'll give you the definition, then and there. But I'm not sure if they can use a comma correctly in a sentence. So, an activity where I'll make them listen to something and then ask them to observe, that might probably work in terms of both speaking and writing.
Right. Last but not the least, sir, I want to ask you so many questions. It's a very interesting topic, but because of the time constraint,
Yeah.
and you're working too today. So, what advice would you give teachers skeptical about using films in English class?
Oh, just go ahead with it. Just go ahead with it. I mean, I'm sure if they're English teachers, they like reading and watching films.
Right.
So just make sure. I end up talking so much about movies, and again, this is the difference that I've observed. Maybe it's because I'm aging now, and somehow I'm not able to relate as much with my students as I used to. But 12 years ago, I used to talk a lot more books in the class. I still do talk a lot of books in the class, where I encourage students to take up books and read, or short stories and read, or whatever it is they're interested in, and read. But film works for the simple reason that they don't feel like they're studying something. So you
Oh,
kind of take the entire idea of conventional learning. They feel like they're relaxed, but my students now, they know that they're not entirely relaxed, even though we are
right.
watching a film, there'll be some activity, something that's going to come, but they know that it's not going to be a dull, boring class where I'm talking. It is fun, because sometimes what happens is, particularly when you have like contrasting scenes, uh, where there are more than one possibilities or one point of view that's put across, you have students automatically, naturally debating with each other. uh, as a teacher, this is one thing I'm primarily concerned about when I'm being observed, because I worry that the class decorum is probably going for a toss. But in my experience, I just let my students talk. If they're having a debate, let them just take those 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and just let them get their points across. And if there is any substance in that, we kind of take it, and then we have. So what to cut this short, what I'm trying to say is, don't be skeptical about films. They're a great source to teach writing, particularly narratives, because if you're teaching IGCSE English, then you know that there's narrative writing, that where the examiners kind of demand great structure, good characterization. Those are some of the comments examiners post once they pass on the transcripts to schools. So films are a great medium to teach writing, because as a teacher, you're getting across your learning objectives the way you want. And as students, as receptors, there's no dull moment in the class when there's a film. And then, once you start giving out texts, you have already kind of established that you rarely bring things that are dull in the classroom. So their approach towards the stories or books that you bring to class will also be slightly different. So go for it, like go for it. My experience using films has been fantastic, and I'm sure your experience using films in class will be equally great. So just go for it.
Wonderful sharing, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Nair, for that insightful and thought-provoking presentation.
yeah.
We truly appreciate you sharing your expertise on our platform today.
All right.
Anything else you want to mention, sir, before I end the session?
Uh, it has been a fantastic experience coming here and delivering a talk. It was a great learning. The Q&A, particularly in the end, it has been enriching. Because the questions that you have asked me, I've kind of got a glimpse at how teachers think. What their inhibitions are. So all in all, thank you so much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate you inviting me here and letting me speak my mind in front of like-minded people. So thank you so much.
The pleasure is mine, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend. I'll end the session now.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.